Single overhead camshaft only has one camshaft for each side of the cylinder. So, for example, in a pushrod engine, you always have one camshaft in the block and pushrods also in the block. So the advantage of SOHC is you get the advantage of dual overhead cam with the higher revving at the mid-range, but the lower range also. Companies like Ford and Chrysler and Dodge implemented single overhead cam, which is essentially you put the camshaft above the cylinder head, which removes the need for push rods, because push rods also can be affected by the heat of the engine block. So by putting the camshafts over the engine block, you reduce the heat that would affect the camshafts operating properly. So you have one camshaft for a V6 in each bank of cylinders, so two camshafts on a V6, and for a V6 with dual overhead cam, you'd have two camshafts for each bank of cylinders for a total of four. So pushrod, you'd have one camshaft, single overhead cam V6, you'd have two total camshafts, and a dual overhead cam V6 or V8, you'd have four total camshafts. And single overhead cam and dual overhead cam is just simple numbers. One camshaft for each bank of cylinders in a single overhead cam, two camshafts for each bank of cylinders in a dual overhead cam. So a V6 configuration, you'd have two total camshafts or four total camshafts for a dual overhead cam. So think of it as shafts per bank of cylinders. Single overhead cam, you have one camshaft per each bank of cylinders with one crankshaft as well. And dual overhead cam, you have one crankshaft with two camshafts for each bank of cylinders. So really, if you wanted to know the basics of which engine works best and which one is best for you, first just understand you have to pick a valve train configuration. So single overhead cam is probably the best of both worlds. It has a crankshaft driving one camshaft on each side of the engine bay, and then so these are a few examples of SOHC V6 engines. Now, DOHC engines are a lot different because they have two camshafts per each bank of cylinders, whereas a single overhead camshaft only has one camshaft for each side of the cylinder. So, for example, in a pushrod engine, you always have one camshaft in the block and pushrods also in the block. So the advantage of SOHC is you get the advantage of dual overhead cam with the higher revving at the mid-range, but the lower range also. Dual overhead cam is really good for if you want better fuel economy and to meet all the fuel economy standards set by the emissions and regulations. But if you just want a good, reliable engine that is going to perform it like regular around city driving, the single overhead cam is probably a lot more reliable. And most people prefer single overhead cam if they are mechanics and they like to work on the cars in